Welcome to another episode of A Champion's Mind, and today we've got a very special guest. This guy's done it all. In the last 9 years, he's built an absolutely amazing brand. It's called StreetX, and welcome to the show, Daniel Bradshaw. Daniel, how you going today, buddy?
Good, thanks, and you. Thanks for having me.
StreetX, man. It's become massive here in Perth, Western Australia, and I'm sure the world. Tell us a bit more about StreetX and what does it mean? What's it all about?
Obviously it'll be 9 years old later this year. And originally it was started whilst I was in my last semester of university, and it was going to be more of an online store and something different that I thought I was doing a great entrepreneurial thing and creating something that no one else had. But as with any business, you learn very fast that it's not exactly what you thought was going to happen. So I was in my last semester of a commerce degree at UWA, sorry. So I was doing all the entrepreneurial things, like the entrepreneur unit, which was one of my main sort of units that I found a liking to. And then one of our assessments was create a business plan for something. So after doing that unit, I thought, okay, I can try this. I'll create a business plan and I'll sort of get things into motion to start the business that I want to. But then even with that being said, like I look back now at that business plan, it's like a joke. It's amazing to see how quick things change and how you have to adapt over time, and of course how you change as a person and how your business in turn changes too.
Awesome, man. And StreetX, the name STX as well, shortened. What's the meaning behind it? How did you think it?
That also came, as I said, I was doing a commerce degree. So in that degree, of course, you do all the financial sort of units and things of that nature. So my original concept for the brand or the obviously store as it was first was to be a stock exchange themed website. So with that in mind, it was first going to be called the Street Exchange, which was linked to obviously the basic form of exchange is obviously hand-to-hand street meetings and whatnot. That never happened, and then it sort of morphed into StreetX, which was more so themed on a new stock exchange that was coming to Australasia at the time called StreetX. So that I felt was an easy fit. And then obviously now down the track, I'm much happier I went with that rather than the 3-word bloody name.
Nice, man. Now, Daniel, StreetX has taken off massively. What is success to you?
In terms of the brand now and the store, obviously, obviously, as I said already, it will be 9 years at the end of the year. But for me, it's probably been the last year where it's got to a point where it's of some success. Whereas, as so many friends and people have always said, oh, it's doing so well and whatnot. But yeah, I look at probably the first 7.5, 8 years and still very much now is a massive learning curve. And it's probably only the last year where we've started sort of feeling the effects of things going well and things moving. So that sort of leads more so now to my answer about success. I still definitely feel that I haven't experienced that. Like as every year goes past, I always feel that I want to be further than I am. So it's almost like a humbling experience, because it's like 9 years in, I thought I'd be, from a monetary standpoint, you think you'd be a multi-millionaire, you'd have a massive brand that's sold everywhere, but that's not reality. So it's been a good learning curve. So for me now, obviously the last year's been great, but now with that being said, that's the foundation, how I want to move. So the next 5 years for me is sort of how I'll achieve success and the basic. And for me, the foremost important thing is obviously being happy with what I'm doing and as a person. So waking up every day, wanting to go to work and wanting to do more and wanting to succeed. So that's where I'm at now with my success. And it's now sort of how to formulate the structure for the business to go forward. And then over the next 5 years, sort of reach that continued success of obviously being able to enjoy my life and live with freedom, employ multiple people, add to the business, grow. And then, of course, the monetary issue isn't of the most utmost importance, but it does massively contribute to those other elements. So obviously, freedom with the business comes by having a set number of sales, which in turn gives you a set amount of money to play with and expand. So that's sort of what I've noticed over the last year as we've improved on a revenue level and, of course, profit. We've had a lot more opportunity to sort of do the things that I wanted. So instead of just making t-shirts and hoodies, which is the bread and butter of the business, we've been able to expand into different lines of product, different events, and different sort of things. And for me, that's more linked to success because it allows me to do everything that I want to do rather than just focusing on continuing with what we're doing. So that's sort of way I look at success, is opening up doors that I never thought I'd have. That's sort of how I look at it nowadays.
Yeah, man. Was there any sort of like influence in your life growing up that was a factor to get you in the mindset you have today? Because it sounds like you got a pretty unique mindset, man. Like getting up every day, giving it your best shot, building this kick-ass brand. Like, who was that, and how did that have like shape you as a person?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Especially, I'd probably say that 1 and 2 would be my mum and dad would be the main thing, and both very, very different angles. My mum obviously grew up looking after us and taking care of us sort of thing, and taking us to sport every day and doing all the usual things that the traditional mum does. Obviously nowadays it's very different with mother and father roles. But my mum was very much fashion influenced, which that actually ended up rubbing off on me. She would always try and buy us nice clothes. She would always have nice clothes. So I think subconsciously that sort of rubbed off on me from that aspect. And then one thing I clearly remember, I think when I was 15, my mum took me to New York, and I just went on the internet and tried to find these shops that I wanted to go to. And I just researched them, and then ended up just going off on the subway by myself and going to all these places and just being like amazed and just being like, whoa, I can't believe this shit exists. I think that's where that angle of creativity and desire to look into that realm came from. But then more so the business mindset, I think definitely comes from my dad, who was always heavily work orientated, worked late, worked long hours, was always working. So I think that's where that drive came from. And then initially when I wanted to get into the marketing side of the aspect, marketing side of a degree and whatnot, that's where my dad sort of more so pushed me to go down that realm, because I was unsure what I wanted to do. And he sort of suggested that sales and marketing is always a good base to have, because it can allow you to get into anything. So I think initially that's where those two sort of creative forces came from. And then now, even with our design and a lot of the stuff we release, it's heavily influenced by basically stuff I grew up doing and wearing. Obviously, we do a lot of athletic and sportswear styled stuff, which comes about of growing up playing soccer and being heavily involved in sport. So now it's sort of meshing those childhood desires into product that's wearable now and from a young age.
Yeah, man. And it sounds like you're pretty active as a kid, by the sounds of it. Parents keep you in sport, having the opportunity to travel around the world. Who was Daniel Bradshaw as a kid, man? Like,
heavily sports orientated. I'm very much like I am now. I love very out there, like talking to people, very much don't care what anyone thinks. And it was the same when I was young. If the teachers said to do one thing, it was to do the opposite. Just being active. Like I surfed a lot as a kid, played soccer heavily as a kid, did martial arts as a youngster, and ran a lot. So it was always swimming. It was always something. Like I liked doing a lot of things. I was never amazing at one set thing, but I could do and I can still do a lot of things.
Yeah, man. Now let's circle back. You said you were very fortunate to head to New York, and Mum took you around the places, and you just hit the subway and you just went to all these amazing places. How old were you, and like what really stood out to you? What labels or what elements really stood out to you? Go, this is sick.
I think I was 15. So that's maybe year 10, I think. But yeah, I mean, I was obviously very lucky and fortunate to go on a trip like that. And there was one brand and shop that stood out, and still to this day does, a brand called A-Life, which is very well known in New York. And it's not, that brand was at a very high point and then went through a lot of legal and financial problems and had a few years of hiatus, but still does well now. But still, that's just a good, for me, is a good reference point, no matter how well or badly that brand does. It's always a good reference point to remember, oh shit, that's where I sort of realized that's the sort of thing I wanted to create and sort of try and bring here and obviously take elsewhere and do around the world.
Now, let's talk about your StreetX journey and how you got started. Obviously, you're saying you did it in uni. Tell us, like, there's a lot of guys and girls out there today that like to throw the word entrepreneur around and actually out of them words.
Yeah.
Tell us about your journey, man.
My thing now with that is that I would hate people to like call me that. It's like, I mean, it's like you see a lot of journeyman fighters. It's guys who just keep going. Like you look at someone like a Michael Bisping who's fought around forever and eventually reach the top. And I look at my business journey and what I do is the same. It's like you just keep going. There's none of the fake highs that you see, and like there's no quick way to the top. So I look at my journey as very much slow and steady. It's like one step at a time. You've got to take all the little steps to reach the top. And it's just, yeah, the only way I've from my experience that I could tell anyone is just slow and steady, unless you've got, of course, a big capital backing or it's a very different type of business. Of course, that's going to be different. But for a very grassroots small business like mine, to grow into something big is always going to take time, and you can't force that to happen. So obviously for my journey from university to originally the online stores, we then went into pop-up stores, and that just happened by chance. My friend at the time had a gallery in Freo, and I never ever went to Freo. I'm from the northern suburbs, so that was a big step. And then we were there for ages, but we had multiple days where we made $0. So it was like, I was living at home, I think 20 at the time, so I had no cares in the world. I was living at home underneath my mum's house, so it was fine for me. I didn't really care. And we did that for about initially a 1 day one, then a month, then I think it was a 3 to 6 month one or a 3 month one we maybe did there. And then eventually I met a girl who ran a pop-up space in Northbridge who was like, oh, do you want to come do it? And again, I didn't really go to Northbridge either. I just messaged a friend. I was like, oh, you work in Northbridge, does it get busy? So that was the extent of my market research back then. And then she was like, yeah, it's a lot busier than Freo. So I was like, oh, sick, it will go well. And then we moved there, and that was a six month stint. And that was where I really realized how much more powerful it was than online. Because back then, as online still is now, it's a different world. And I had no clue about online through my degree, because the degree didn't involve anything digital. It's basically textbook stuff on marketing. So I was very much, and still am, a people person. So the store worked well because I was always there. It was easy to interact with people, and it's a lot easier to interact and sell that message if you're there all the time. So I was at the pop-up 7 days a week, did all the work. And then when that came to an end, I was sort of like, oh shit, like only way we're getting money is through having a brick and mortar space. So I started looking for a permanent space, and then eventually found our first shop space, signed that up, and we ended up being there for 6 years. And that led to another good story, because we're basically there for 6 years, and that got to the point where the building we were in was potentially, or I'd heard whispers of it being redeveloped, and the car park next door being redeveloped. So I was sort of like, well, we can't have a shop if it's being redeveloped. It's gonna ruin the shop. So when I heard that, we probably had about a year left on our lease. So I was sort of just, the first thing was, okay, I don't want to have any landlord having power over me or over our brand. So what's the easiest way we can get around that? So basically it was pushing more of our marketing and strategy back towards online, which we hadn't done for a long time. I sort of got a little bit complacent having the shop because it was doing quite well. You sort of get, I mean, as with any business, once one thing goes well, you get a bit stuck in your ways and you get too focused on that. Yeah, so the biggest thing was sort of just trying to broaden those horizons and focus on online as well as the shop. So we started pushing everything there. And then as that year sort of wound up, the landlord still wouldn't give us any concrete advice. So I started looking for a new space, and eventually we found one. But the biggest thing for me was that switch in the business stance just gave me so much more power in everything, because any negotiation at the end of the day, I was like, well, we don't need your space. We've got a strong online business now. So it made me way less hasty to jump to whatever the landlord said. And we ended up getting a really great deal at the space we're in now, and a way better deal than a shop that we had that was in a far worse location. So I sort of look at that change as a massive benefit to our business, and it just sort of made me open my eyes a bit and use what I was meant to learn in university. Like, you can't, with marketing, you can't just do one thing, which what you would be realizing now. It's like, we've all had brick and mortar businesses and online. It's great having them as a medium, but this whole COVID-19 has opened up all these different ways of reaching people. So sort of that's what I'm sort of trying to refer to, is there's so many different ways to do things that you just can't get stuck in doing one thing. And even if it's going so well, you need to think, okay, cool, what's something I can add to that to make it go even better? So that's sort of my story linking back to COVID-19 now. That's sort of something I've definitely realized. So that's what we've tried to do now, is take what I've learned on that journey and add it in. So it's cool, let's not just switch just to, oh, cool, it's StreetX is just online now. It's how do we make it online, but how do we add in all these different elements that are going to increase engagement and going to make everything go better. So there's no one set way to do things. So that was very much over time I've been taught, is through experience, and of course having the shop, I've learned is there's no one set way to do things. You have to attack in all different ways. So it's like fighting. You can't just hit one person continuously with one punch. It's like, cool, you throw a punch high, then you throw a low, and then you throw a kick high. It's different things like that to set up different ways of attack.
Absolutely, man. It sounds like you relate to fighting to business and having that approach.
Yeah, for sure.
Daniel, what's been the proudest moment of your career to date, and why?
Jeez, I mean, I very much look at my career now as it's the start. So it's hard to determine or pinpoint the actual one thing that I'm most proud of. I'd say probably opening the new shop we're in now, because that was very much the first time ever we've had more so financial freedom to do something and like a blank canvas to work on. The first, obviously, shop we had was done on a very minimal budget, and we try to create something that we liked. Whereas this one now was, okay, we've got a bit more capital to play with. We've got a bit more we can do. Obviously got all the ideas. This was the first time we could actually be like, wow, we can fully implement what we want, obviously with some restrictions. But it was the first time I've been able to have a bit more of an experiment with what we've got and really make something we wanted to, rather than being stuck to the parameters of, oh, cool, you have to stay this color, width, or whatever it is. So I think on that front, that's probably the coolest thing we've done. It's still, for me, it's hard. I think the next 5 years I'll get a few more of those stories to tell.
Definitely, man. And I think people underestimate the hard work and what goes into establishing a successful brand or being successful in general. Talk about your own journey and like we talked about before, having to be flexible with your approach.
Yeah, I mean, it's long days, long hours, and a lot of those days too. It's everything takes time. Unfortunately, there's no quick fix, and if you do know that quick fix, I'd love to know. But it's been a long, slow burn. Like I said before, if you don't have that capital backing to try and make things go quick, it's a very long and, I mean, potentially tedious battle to sort of get things where you want. Like, everyone's got a vision of their business of where they want it to be, but to actually get it to that point, there's so many steps and obstacles that you could never imagine, and no textbook or degree will prepare you for. I think experience for me has been the biggest thing, just learning on the go, and every day a new thing comes up that you didn't think you'd have to deal with, but it's just dealing with that and getting used to it. It's like everyone's grown up working jobs where it's 9 to 5, or you've worked at a retail shop, or you've done something somewhere. And you realize as soon as you get into business how different it is. There's no set hours, there's no set number of tasks, there's no, oh, I don't have time to do this today. It's okay, how do I make this happen with this exact same amount of time? How do I now do 10 extra tasks that I didn't have before and complete it at the same time? And then it's cool. And now I want to go to sleep, but I still can't stop thinking about everything I have to do. So it's how do you compartmentalize everything? It's just like it's a non-stop game. It's like a rat running around in a wheel. It just never stops, and there's always something new that comes.
Long hours, long days, and it's only what
Yeah.
you put in, head out.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, StreetX is in one of the most competitive industries. What sets it apart from the rest?
I think it's sort of it's a hard one to define, because the way for me competitors, I don't really look at competitors. Because again, that's just more so my mentality. I don't think anyone's like us as a brand, and then as a person, or if I consider myself a director of that brand, I don't see anyone in my industry that's like me. I'm so different to everyone in my industry, specifically and locally here in Western Australia, and obviously over east too. There's no brands that are somewhat similar, I'd say. So it's more so, I think the main issue for us is just focusing on ourselves and doing what we do and expanding on that and building on that. So it's things that we like or desire. That's cool. It's how do we put that into place, and then how do we build on that and tell that story that's authentic. So how do we tell people who we are without treading on other people's toes and being true to ourselves? That's the biggest thing I sort of look at, is trying to make sure everything we do is a legitimate story or has authenticity to it. Because as soon as you're trying to tell someone else's story, no one cares. They're going to buy that other person's story. So for us, there needs to be a point of reference to sort of everything we do. Like same with the concept for the shop we built out. We did a whole, originally the concept was to do the floor with a smashed glass installation, and that came about from seeing a store in Japan do that when I went there. So obviously I was like, cool, I don't want to create exactly that, because that's got no meaning. It's just getting what you've seen on your travels, which of course has a point of reference, but I don't want to create that exact thing. So to put that into practice, I sort of more so looked, how could we make this our own? And one of the biggest things I've always had, especially with our industry and anything creative, a big connotation with Perth is you have to leave to be successful. So that sort of sprung to my mind, and I was like, how can I incorporate our shop design into this? So what we did with the floor idea is we flipped that to the roof concept and had it as the glass ceiling. And that's a thing I always looked at, is people would always say Perth as a glass ceiling, because you can only reach X point, you have to leave to get further. So the whole concept with the roof was, cool, let's smash that theory and let's make the roof, instead of just a flat glass ceiling, let's smash the roof and let's put all color through it, because that gives sort of an identity to that idea. Is you smash that theory and there's all this beautiful color and ideas and creativity coming through. So that's sort of how we tried to tell our story, or a story that not many people know, through design, obviously, of our store, which in turn is our product. So that's the way I sort of look at everything we do in terms of competitors. It's like, as long as you can focus on yourself first and foremost as a brand, and of course then in turn as people, I think that's where more so success lies, rather than being like, oh, cool, let's check what everyone's doing this morning and plan our day around that. That's not reality for us. I think for any successful business, you can't be.
Two questions from what you said. Daniel, growing up, it sounds like you at a young age discovered that doing the opposite, or doing what you wanted to do, had been one of your biggest superpowers. And we live in an age where people tend to have a tendency to follow people, sheep words. What was that pivot point for you, man? How old were you?
Again, I think it was just how I was raised. There was no real point of when it happened. I just hated being told what to do. Like even if my parents told me what to wear, I'd wear the opposite. And then if I went to school, they said you have to have hair X long, I'll grow it longer. I was just always like that as a person, and I still am. That comes with some parameters though. There's ways of listening. Like one of my biggest strengths, I think, is listening. I'm happy to listen to people, and I'll take in the great information, but the noise I can block out easily. And that's one of the things. If someone's telling you what to do and it's actually the right thing, you have to listen. So I very much hate being told what to do, but if one of my staff or a friend I respect or someone says, hey, Daniel, what you're doing is wrong, you need to do it this way, and I look at it and it's actually right, you have to accept and acknowledge that. Whereas if it's just bullshit, if it's outside noise, someone saying, oh, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? It's like, cool, man, I don't care. Like, you got to focus on what you're doing. But I think one of the biggest things with that, for me, that mentality is awesome, but it's also being able to adapt when necessary. So when there is times, like as many times I've been told by people that I respect, there's certain things you need to change. And then if you actually evaluate it and realize you do need to change that, being able to adapt and suck up your pride and do that is also very important.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so true, man. And the second question I have, like, I'm so interested, you said, waking up and then looking at what everyone else is doing in the world and then making that as a habit of starting your day. How does Daniel Bradshaw start his day?
I mean, I normally get up, of course, I have a coffee like anyone else, and I love being on the internet and looking at everything and checking what's going on. But it's more so like, if you've been in business or are in business, you should know what your end goal or what you want to do is. I'm not one for rigorous goal setting and writing things on paper and whatnot. You can do that if you want, but you should know in your head what you want from your business, and in turn that should set up your day. So if you know you want to be the biggest brand or the biggest gym, every day waking up, you should be like, cool, what's the next step I can do to get to that? And then even now, especially something more relevant right now with all the COVID-19 stuff, is it's just cool seeing people doing all these different adaptive things, because it gives so many more ideas. Like I've seen cafes or gyms like you guys or whatever, people adapting and doing different forms of showcasing their business. So it makes me realize, cool, how can I adapt that to my business? How can I implement more things to create more for my customers and for my people? Because that's the whole end game now is just trying to do more, and I want to do everything. I don't want to just segregate myself to one thing, as I want to be able to do everything. Anything that I like or desire, I want to be able to showcase and sort of be involved with.
I feel like so many people just quit when they're faced with a bit of adversity or a little bit of failure, and a lot of people are not really open to talking about the opportunity of success or the cost opportunity of success. Like, what have been some of your biggest lessons today?
I mean, yeah, even especially with that, I think that's the biggest thing. It links back to that entrepreneur thing. Is everyone's happy to sit back and have their opinion and be outspoken and talk. Oh, I've read this textbook. I've done this thing. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to implement. Like, it's fucking bullshit. You need to actually get out there and do it with your own money. That's like, I've had it over the years, non-stop. People tell me you need to do this, you need to do that. Until you've done what you're saying with your own money and you've put the risk and done it yourself, don't try and tell me. And that's one of the biggest things I like now is I just see, like, Instagram now is rife. I don't understand how it's happened, but just people who are somehow, I don't know what it is, an influencer or an entrepreneur. It's like it's the cool thing to do now. And that's fine. People can do what they want. But I just think, for me, I don't try and tell people I'm an entrepreneur at all. I'm doing what I want to do and trying to build what I want. And that's in turn led to other people liking it. And of course, you're always going to get people who don't like it. And if you don't like it, that's fine. The next person will. I'm not trying to cater to every single person, because that's impossible. I just definitely think, for me, there's been, of course, there's been a lot of obstacles. Every day there's a new problem. So it's getting over those little problems. And I mean, failure is inevitable. You're never going to have like for us as a business, you're not going to have every single release sell out and do well. You're not going to have every contractual argument you have with the landlord go well. You're always going to have negativity. So it's like, you need to just understand that you need to be able to deal with that and sort of roll with the punches and adapt. You can't just it's not going to be clear sailing non-stop. So you've got to get immune to that and get a thick skin and work out, cool, this is what's wrong. How do I fix it? How do I get on to the next thing, and how do I expand?
Absolutely, man. That's the essence of the champion's mind right there. Just getting instead of talking about it, putting it into action, which is the biggest thing. One foot in front of the other. Now, community seems like a big contributor to your success. You know, you sponsor athletes. You've had your brick and mortar store, the online stuff. You've got a massive following on Insta and all the socials. Like, how do you select athletes?
I mean, even for me, it's like I think it's not the thing where you put focus on. That just comes about by like what I like. Like, I've always been involved in that sort of world. Like when I was younger, of course, I competed at a lower level, which is where I sort of reached. But I always loved that growing up, and still will train. So that's just come about by, my friends are literally these people who do these things that I love on a far higher level. So how can that's the involvement that I can have, is I can be involved in that through helping them on a branding level, I suppose. But even for that, it's not a big, like, we're not like a sponsoring and paying athletes to do stuff. It's like, these people are my friends. Cool, it might get them more attention having our logos on them. It might not. They might think it looks cool, and that's all that matters. As long as it's a little thing, that's all that matters. Again, it links back to community. If they want to do it and it helps them, of course we'll do it. It just depends. It's not segregated to one sport. Anything that we're involved with or have got friends in, that's the idea, is if they want to, they're like, let me do this, let me do that, that's cool. If it makes sense, for sure. There's no set like parameters you want to meet or anything like that. It's for us, we know what our business is, so these little extra things on the side are just cool ways to have fun and enjoyment and little added things for the business.
Absolutely. And obviously there's a lot of guys out there and girls that would love to be associated with such a powerful brand and identity. In your opinion, what advice would you give to aspiring, let's say athletes, for example, who would wish to be sponsored by or wish to be sponsored one day?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is probably links to everything I've said, is focus on yourself. If it's going to happen, it will happen. But you need to build up your brand or your entity, especially if it is in relation to a fighter. You need to be doing all the right things. So that comes down to, you look at business and fighting side by side, if it's a business, the business needs to be doing well. So you need to be focusing on things that are going to make the business do well, and creating what you're doing and focusing on everything you're doing to expand and go forward with the business. And it's the same with fighting. If you're doing everything to train and whatnot and eat properly and all that sort of stuff, of course, there's way more chance of that happening. But like I said before, it's a multi-pronged approach. You can't just be the best fighter, or you can't just have the best creative ability in business. You need to have everything. You need to be the whole package. Like if you look at it as a t-shirt, you might be the best artist in the world, but if you have no idea to market that, no one's going to care. You might be the best boxer in the world in MMA, but then someone could just come kick your legs. Like, they're obviously very simple ways of summarizing it, but that's, I think, marketing it is very easy to summarize with analogies like that, because if you do one thing great, that's amazing. Keep doing that great, but then how do you add in all the other things to complement that? And again, I think if you want to be sponsored, it's like, cool, that's great, you want to be sponsored, but don't do everything you're doing just for that sponsorship. You need to further what you're doing, your career, and then those things in turn come later.
With what you've just said, would it be fair to say complexity and consistency?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's the same with any sport. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're not consistent with what you're doing, it's like if you go for a run 7 days a week and then next week you don't run at all, the third week you're going to go for a run and you're going to feel very different. Like you can't just chop and change.
Now, Daniel, talk about your community. Who are your people who does StreetX serve, and like who loves the brand?
I mean, we've obviously got all my close friends and staff and everything, of course, are involved. It serves them. But more so the main demographic, I would say, is probably, we get young kids from 11 or 12 all the way up to older friends, and then parents. Like we get dads who will come in with their kids, and the dads will end up buying stuff. My biggest thing on that, though, is it's like growing up, when I saw all these brands, they were very much tight knit sort of click things. So it's like, oh, you have to know the right person to wear this. And I understand that's cool. And I like that ideology. But my whole thing was I always wanted to create something that everyone could wear. So obviously, of course, everyone's going to like it. But again, like I said, if a dad came in with his kid and bought his kid stuff, I want to make stuff that the dad can also be like, whoa, that's actually pretty cool. I want to buy it too. So I never wanted to segregate it from anyone. I always wanted to make it something that, regardless of what you do or what you're into, there's still something for you, be it the color of a garment, the design you see, the type of garment. There is a way that everyone can sort of fit into it. Because that's how I am as a person. I like talking to everyone. I don't really care who you are, what you do. If you exude friendly energy, I'll talk to you just like on a normal personal basis, besides all the business and everything. If someone's a normal, nice, genuine person who interacts with you, you should always interact back, because that's how everyone should be.
Absolutely. And speaking about that, I'm a big believer of you are the sum of the 5 people you surround yourself with. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, so I've always read that in books and understood that. But I mean, I've got some friends who are absolute idiots. Like, I've got friends who are absolute idiots who I see, obviously not myself in, but I've got little aspects of them that you take from. It's a hard one, because I understand that thing, but you can't, like, growing up, there was the conversation that, cool, if you want to be the sum of your 5 best people, you need to be friends with all the top performers and all this. But for me, I think you need balance. Of course, you want to be around great people, but you need balance in your life. Like, one person might bring you laughter, one person might bring you ideas or creativity, one person might bring you happiness or something. You need to have balance, and not everyone is going to be good at everything. So you can't just get 5 mates who are going to be, oh, yep, these are the 5 best fighters in WA, let's be mates with them. Or these are the 5 best business people in WA. I could guarantee I could sit down with the 5 top business people in WA, and a few of them, of course, I'd have nothing in common with. Everything's always going to be different, so it's hard to summarize that. But of course, I think definitely you need to surround yourself with people who you can bounce off ideas with, you can resonate with. But it's trying to balance that. You always need to have people who in your group or circle who bring the best out of you, or they can contribute to what you're doing. So I think it's an ongoing conversation, but I definitely agree with it to some extent. You need to surround yourself with the right people, for sure.
Absolutely. And it sounds like someone as creative as you can take individual things from each person to your
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing, man. And it's pretty cool, because your products speak for themselves. Obviously, the way that you perceive and the way you want to send that message to the people. Now, what about you, man? When are you at your best in terms of training? Is it training? Is it balance and smashing goals, creativity? What is it for you?
I mean, I don't know. My thing is, I don't even know if I'm ever at my best, because some days you have a shock, and some days are great. Some days you think you don't get much done, but you get all the bad stuff done. It's hard. I think you just got to focus on, like you said, consistency. As long as you just keep going and keep doing it, the best will happen. Whereas if you sit back and get down, oh, I didn't do much yesterday, or today's even worse, it's only going to get worse and worse. I think you should just keep going, regardless of how you're feeling or what you're doing. That's the best way forward. Even if you don't reach your goals, it's cool. How can I now reach that goal, the next release or the next fight or whatever it is? You've just got to keep doing. You can't stop and sit back, and you always need to be learning more. You always need to be doing more. And of course, you always need balance. You're not going to have 30 days of the best days of your life in a row. That's just not how the world works, unfortunately. And again, that links back to that whole 5 people thing. I look at what we do now, and a lot of our output happens because of the people we've got around us and the people in place. For me at work, is I'll have an idea, and then they'll be like, no, why don't you do this? And then that's how creativity and things happen, is having the right people or the things around you to make sure those things keep happening. Or you can get as close as possible to achieving what you want to achieve.
Absolutely. Now, I will see on your Instagram, you see a lot of your training, whether it be boxing, Muay Thai, MMA. You do a bit of everything, and you're up there with some great guys that I know and love as well. What is your favorite and to train, like discipline wise, and like how does it keep you on like what influence does it have in your life?
I mean, I grew up obviously watching it as a kid, and then when I was a little bit older, I got into it, and I've always loved it. My biggest thing is it just relates so well to business. It's like you can go and get beaten up every day and then go home and go and do it the next day. It's the same with business. It's like you go to work, you might miss things, you might achieve things, but then the next day it's a whole new day. It's like that's why I used to love, well, I still do, like jiu-jitsu or boxing, and then of course MMA. Now that I'm a bit older, I don't like as much getting fucking headaches and whatnot going home. But yeah, I just love the idea of fighting. I love the idea of the competitiveness and doing more. And especially with me now, with training, all of my friends are all a lot better than me. So it's a great learning experience because it puts me in my place very quickly. But then it's how do you adapt to that place? How do you try and hone in on the things you know you can get better at? And how do you use them to your advantage? So like I look at the guys, even Wes, and then like Jack Becker, Rod Costa, all these guys who are super high level at what they do. And then training with them, it's like, cool, I know I'm going to lose if I do. Well, I know at the end of that, I'm probably going to lose because they're very good. But it's how can I at least try and do the things that I know that I'm good at? How do I implement them? And that's so relatable to businesses because you might not be the biggest brand, but it's how can you do what you do well to keep things going and stay away from other brands. That's sort of why I've always loved the fighting. The thing is, it's the ultimate form of competition, fitness, and mindset. It's like you can get on a bike and go cycling, you can go running, you can go swimming. That's great, but if the world ends, if you can fight, you can protect yourself. And if you can't fight, you're going to be the one getting bloody thrown to the fire. And that's why I like putting that into business because it's like if someone on a business standpoint does something to say fuck with your brand or a competitor, if you think about that, has done something that you don't like or whatnot, having that whole fighting ideology and mentality is great because you can just be like, cool, I know how I can smash you. I know what I can do or what I can do to make sure what I'm doing as a business is better than ever. That's just why, yeah, I've always had a fondness of that. And it's just like until you've done it, like I never fought at a high level, of course, but until you've actually done that and experienced that, it's such a hard thing to explain to people. Like obviously Wes, who's one of my great friends who's fought at all the highest levels, that mentality, regardless of if it's business or another sport, if you've got that mentality, you can take that mentality and put it into anything. That's why I think it's such an important thing and sport that I'll always sort of do is because no matter what you're doing, even if you're shit at it, you can still really put that into practice in business and that can amplify the success of your business, I think.
And just speaking of obviously Wes Kappa, Jack Becker, Rod Costa, even Jamie Weech, who's the hardest guy to spar?
If it's, I think for me, I've just always hated Wes because my thing was, I was always a good runner when I was young, so I always had pretty good cardio. So that's always been the thing I've relied on. But then Wes just has better cardio, so he's better than me at all the aspects of striking and kickboxing and everything. So my thing with everyone I always try to do was cool. I know I'm going to get hit, but I can outlast people. And that's when I fought as an amateur. That was my whole thing. I can't punch hard. I don't do anything hard, but I've got great cardio and heart. So I'll keep going and avoiding getting hit. And then once they get tired, then you sort of get into it. But when you spar with someone who is a lot fitter than you, it's like that heart then goes from, oh shit, what I'm good at is now on the back foot. So like that it's a big learning curve because I've done it and I've just been like, cool, I'll spar 8 rounds with someone who I'm fitter than, and then I'll do 1 round with a Wes or the Weech, and then I'm just like, God, what just happened? So it's just such a cool sport to compare to business because there's so many mental similarities and there's so many things, adversity that you'll get put through that no other sport can put you through and teach you that are just so relative to business.
Absolutely, man. Now, I've got a 60-second challenge for you, Dan, in a second. But before I get to that, I have a question that I personally would like to ask you about the massive billboard under the railway parade pass that I used to drive past every single day with yourself on it. Is that you with the glasses?
Yeah.
That was like such a massive. I look at that and every day I drive past and I was like, that is fucking kick. It's like a massive billboard with your head. You know, you're like a man of the people, almost dressed like a politician. What was your idea behind that, and how did you pull that off? That's some crazy.
That whole character that we created originally came from when we were getting our new shop. We had a lot of drama with the landlord coming to a deal. So my whole thing was I wanted to create a sort of a sub character that was the landlord that I wish we had. So that was just a fun creative spin on that. And then I love talking to people, and I've got no problem with being the face of a brand. Not every brand needs a face, but of course I love attention. So with that, it was like, how can we, a billboard, let's say a TV ad, a radio ad, a billboard, anything like that is stuff in uni where you learn, okay, these are the traditional forms of advertising that no one of my age would ever fucking use because no one cares. Social media, all the stuff online you do. So that's why I was like, cool, no one in our industry or no one of any relevance to us in Australia does this. So cool, let's do it. So I just got in contact with who we could do it with. And I was like, driving around, you see billboards every day. And this, like, sometimes I'm just like, how does this marketing team at this company have a job? Because some of the billboards are just like, oh, cool, that was the shittest fucking waste of money I've ever seen. So my whole thing was I wanted to make it as weird and as different as possible. And what is the way we can portray our brand? Like, I don't want to put look, here's our new t-shirt design on a billboard. It's like, why would I waste money on that? I can just post a photo on Instagram for free. So I just wanted to make it as weird as possible and sort of just something to show personality of the brand. So I was like, what's the weirdest thing? And then we came up with a very weird concept. And it's just me. I think it's like I'm holding my fist up with one of the photos and the other one I'm pointing. Because it was just like we wanted to do something different. And if it makes people laugh, it does. It's just an easy way to interact with people.
Something that
you can't force stuff down people's throat all the time. Sometimes you got to have a bit of fun.
Definitely, man. It's something that I'm for sure. I was like, that's legendary, man. So, good job. Alrighty, man. We've got the 60-second challenge. Daniel, basically, I'll ask you a question, shoot it back as quick as you can. First thing that comes to mind. You ready?
Yep.
Alrighty. What's your favourite burger joint in Perth?
Good burger.
Why?
Best burgers.
Who's your celebrity crush?
Carmen Electra now after watching the Jordan documentary.
What do you think of that anyway?
The documentary? Yeah, awesome. Amazing. Inspirational.
Awesome. Who would you love to fight and why?
Tito Ortiz, because I just like Chuck Liddell more.
At what age did you become a man?
I hit puberty when I was about 20, so fucking very late.
If you could be any animal, what would it be and why?
German Shepherd, because they're the best dogs alive.
What is the first sport you ever played?
Actually, AFL under sixes, I think it's Surrendered on Craig, or under sevens, or soccer under six. I can't remember. One of them.
What's the first job you ever had, and at how long?
I was a dish hand at Voyage Kitchen in Hillary's, and then a little coffee server.
What is your favourite movie of all time?
I've watched Sicario like 4 or 5 times, and I just like guns and explosions. Or A Man Apart with Vin Diesel.
Nice. What 3 items would you take to a deserted island to survive?
Oh, God. I'm very unhandy, so probably some sort of microwave, a laptop, and my mobile.
Amazing. Awesome, man. Awesome. That concludes our 60-second challenge. Daniel, your story is one that is very unique, but also very vibrant, very energetic, and bringing such an amazing, a breath of fresh air to the scene here in Perth, here in Australia. And what is the overall goal for you eventually? Do you want to go worldwide?
Mm.
What do you think the ultimate
Of course, everywhere. So I'd love to, obviously Australia is great and we do well here, but I'd love to do everything, what we do in every country in the world, everywhere. That's the idea, but it's obviously a long, long way away. But it's just baby steps. Start obviously here, then cities over east, cities internationally. It's just slowly building that network and slowly extending the coverage.
Awesome. And before we go, you want to share with our listeners, where can our listeners find you to follow you? Yeah, share that with us.
I mean, Instagram, StreetX. That's probably the easiest way to keep up with everything. And yeah, just everyone stay safe and stay fit and make sure you're doing your best to make the most of the old COVID-19. Don't let it don't let it cripple you.
Daniel, thank you so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate it and hope our listeners really enjoyed your unique story. My name is Pamorn Martdee. This is another episode of A Champion's Mind. Be sure to follow us at Champions Gym on Instagram, and myself, Pamorn Martdee, on Instagram as well. And Daniel, have you got an Instagram profile yourself?
Gucci Smoothie.
Gucci Smoothie, the man himself. Daniel, thank you so much for being on the show today, mate. And I look forward to seeing your journey with StreetX and taking over the world.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.